the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday night today. And no, it's not Tuesday, it's Thursday. What am I'm going nuts. It's Thursday. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on Thursday. It's been a weird week. What can I say? Very strange week. Lot going on in news, a lot going on in the world, a lot going on here in my life, I guess. We're kind of moving to Orange County, California for a few weeks. So I will be in Orange County for 6 weeks, starting on Sunday. Might have a trip to Israel in the middle, so things are in upheaval. We'll figure it all out as we go along, and we'll see what kind of impact it has on shows. Certainly, my film setup in California is going to be quite different than my film setup is here. I don't really have a computer in California. We're going to have to figure all this out, and running it off of a laptop is not great, but we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. Anyway, welcome. What we're going to talk about today. I already have a super chat question about UAE and Israel signing what looks like a beginning of a kind of a peace deal. So we'll talk a little bit about that maybe at some point. We're definitely going to talk about Uber shrugging maybe within 10 days in California. We'll talk about BLM and the beginnings of a backlash maybe. We'll see what happens in November. And the big question on everybody's minds, should schools reopen? That's a big political question of our time, much more important than anything else going on in the world that seems to be consuming everything. I was going to talk about mail-in ballots. I don't have anything to say about mail-in ballots, really, other than obviously Trump is doing everything he can to suppress votes under the excuse of fraud and corruption, and it's just the whole thing is weird. But he must have a reason. I mean, he does these things for a reason. He typically knows what he's doing. But it's just bizarre. So I don't have much to say about that. That doesn't just cause me to have a long monologue about how terrible Trump is as president. All right. So before that, and before I forget, and I see we've already got a couple of Super Chat questions. We've got a special Super Chat event today. We have a Super Chat match. So Brian Rand, who is a supporter of the show kind of on a monthly basis, but also has been very generous on occasion on the Super Chat, he is offering a 2-for-1 match on Super Chat up to $250. So if we can do $250 on Super Chat today, right? If we can do $250 on Super Chat today, then Brian will do, at the end of the show, we'll do a $500 Super Chat. So it's wide open to get $750. So every dollar you give up to $250 is going to match 2-for-1. So if you've been holding back on giving, now is the time to do it. You can do it with a question. You can do it without a question. Either way, Brian will match it. So we have a 2-for-1. This is like Pledge Week on NPR, but you see the difference is on the Yaron Brook Show, Pledge Week never ends. It just goes on and on and on. If we don't get it $250, he'll still match it 2-for-1, but you're leaving money on the table. If we don't get to $250, if we only get it $200, he'll do $400. If you get to $100, he'll do $200. So right now we're at $25. Brian will match $50. So this is encouragement for anybody out there who can and is interested in doing a super match. Then now's a super chat. Now's the time to do it. So do that. Thank you. Existence exists. I told you I'll do the best books on economics and finance when I get to California. I say that every time you ask the question and every time you continue to ask it. I'll be in California next week. Ask me the question next week. But I will count the $1.99 for the match. So even though that was a quick answer. Let's see. I want to say something. Oh, yeah. Last time I said YouTube was withholding the Super Chat from last Saturday where we got to big numbers. They've released that. So they've now released it. They've got a glitch in the system. It's the second time now. It's taking them 4 or 5 days to clear the funds. Maybe because we're hitting these new high levels of Super Chat contributions, they're suspicious and they want to make sure that it's all legit before they give it a thumbs up. But so far, you know, they've been good about 4 or 5 days later clearing the amount. So not to worry if you gave money last Saturday, it did clear and it did go through, and it's on the way to me. I only get it at the end of. I only get it next month, at the end of next month. It takes, they tally up the month and then they give it towards the end of the month. Okay, I think that's all we have in terms of administrative stuff. Don't forget, before you leave today, to like the show. You can like it now just so you don't forget later. Later, of course, those of you who would like, I think it's really, really crucial to share the shows, the full shows, the short videos. But the more you share, the more exposure we get. I would ask you to subscribe. Most of you are already subscribers. Those of you not, please do subscribe and click the bell to get notified when live shows go on. But do subscribe. But the fact is, almost all of you are subscribers already. The only way to get new people to listen to the show and therefore to increase subscribers, to get to 100,000, to get to 1 million, to get to the kind of numbers we really need to get to, is by you sharing the show. That's how we're going to get to it. So share. Use social media to advance your ideas by sharing the show. And finally, use Super Chat today. As I said, match 2 for 1. Every dollar we raise up to $250. We're at $50 now, so we've already raised $150 this show, because Brian Rand will match $2 for every dollar raised, up to $250. All right. We continue to get questions, but let me start the show, and then, I'll take questions on topic, and then towards the end of the show, I'll cover the questions that are not on topic, but we'll do this. And in the meantime, I need a copy over the Q&A, the Super Chat questions, because otherwise they get lost in the feed. All right, let's start with Uber Shrugging in California. This is a cool story, not a cool story, a sad story, very sad story about destructive California politics. It's not new, it's not a surprise. But we'll see if Uber has the guts to follow through with its threats. California passed a law a few months ago called AB 5. AB 5 basically, I don't know all the nuances and all the nitty-gritty of it, but basically bans the use of independent contractors on a regular basis. If you're using somebody on a regular basis, whether it's a writer, whether it's a driver, whether it's a delivery guy, you need, according to AB 5, you need to count them as employees, which means you need to give them benefits, you need to give them health care, you have to offer them the whole slew, and of course they get then a salary, they get withholding, they get the whole, everything that's got to do with being an employee. So you and the person who's going to work for you don't get to decide whether they're an independent contractor or not, whether they're an employee or not. The government gets to decide for you. Now, the government already has criteria for who can be an employee and who can be a contractor. There's a whole list of this. So they're very strict in terms of limiting your ability to use contractors for a limited period of time, for particular types of work, and all kinds of limitations. We used to go through this at the Institute. When could we make somebody a contractor? When did we have to make them an employee? What AB 5 does is it expands the definition of employee far greater and shrinks the ability to use contractors in dramatic fashion, dramatically shrinks the definition of what a contractor is and who can be a contractor. All specifically aimed at turning the drivers for Uber, Lyft, and all the food delivery services into employees instead of contractors. So this law passed a few months ago, last year, I think. Since then, all these tech companies, all these delivery companies have been doing basically two things. One, they've been suing to claiming the law is whatever, unconstitutional, wrong, whatever, and delaying. And by the way, none of them have turned the people who work for them into employees. They're all still treating them as independent contractors. So they've sued to try to delay. They've also put together a proposition that Californians will vote on in November. So the idea is we're not going to play by the rules. We're going to pay fines. We're going to sue. We're going to hold this off in court for as long as we can. And then we've got this proposition in November to overturn AB 5. So we'll delay until November. So that has been happening. And then what happened recently is that the Attorney General of California sued the companies saying, wait a minute, you're just delaying. The law is the law. You have to abide by the law. You have to start treating them as employees. And Uber and Lyft said, no way, and he filed an injunction against them. They filed a motion at the Supreme Court to overturn the injunction against them. The Supreme Court basically ruled, I think yesterday, no, you have to, there's a law, and you have to follow the law, and the law says you have to treat them as employees. And Uber and Lyft both said, and by the way, the Attorney General of California was very clever. He didn't file the injunction on Uber and Lyft to force them to to convert everybody to employees immediately, unlike Uber Eats. Because everybody needs Uber Eats right now, right? I mean, Uber Eats is like off the charts right now because of COVID, because restaurants are closed. So everybody is using Uber Eats right now. So he didn't file on that because he knew it would be unpopular. He only filed on the regular Uber and regular Lyft. So Uber and Lyft both announced yesterday that they're going to appeal some more. They've got more appeals, but basically the Supreme Court of California gave them until the 20th of the month. And Uber and Lyft said, look, if we don't get this overturned by the 20th, then we're out of California. We're basically shutting down in California. Now, they too are not shutting down Uber Eats. They can still treat their drivers as contractors until the Attorney General of California goes after them there, until November. But they will shut down Uber and Lyft in California. Now, I, for one, hope they do that. Finally, somebody needs to stand up to the bastards in Sacramento. Somebody needs to stand up to these statists and tell them, we're not going to work on those terms. We're just not going to work on those terms. Uber did this a long time ago in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas had all these requirements that Uber had to fulfill, background checks and all kinds of stuff. I think Uber does background checks anyway, but this was onerous in terms of what the city council in Austin required Uber to do. So Uber said, okay, and they just left the city. And for a long time, you'd arrive in Austin, you'd expect to be able to use Uber, and you couldn't use Uber. And it was like, I think the brains of all those Gen Xers were blowing up. I think there were exploding brains all over Austin, Texas, because nobody could quite get their hands around the fact that a company would leave and leave them stranded. Don't you have a, God-given right to an Uber whenever you want it, within 3 minutes, on demand, whether they make money or not? Finally, I think after a couple of years where all kinds of other companies filled in the gap for Uber, but none of them really worked very well, Uber renegotiated with Austin and came back into Austin. So I'd love to see them leave California. Love to see them leave California. I think it would be great. It would be good for consumers to learn. It would actually increase the probability that they win in November on Proposition 22, which would reverse the law. So it would increase their probability. Let consumers actually suffer the consequences of stupid government policy. I can't imagine, anything better than that. So it's cool, and let's hope it actually happens. Let's hope that Uber actually shrugs in the face of immoral, illegitimate laws that restrict their behavior. That would be very cool. It's interesting that all of this, Uber and Lyft are considered these villains, and nobody accuses them of overcharging. Uber and Lyft are fairly, cheap. Service is fantastic as compared to taxis and anything else. Convenient. A whole generation, I think, has not bought cars, and so you'd argue that environmentally it's good, right? Fewer cars. Better usage of assets. The car otherwise just sits there. Now you can make a living driving it, and that's a benefit. All these benefits, and Uber still loses huge amounts of money. Huge. I think last quarter they lost $1.something billion, right? So it's not like they're making a fortune and they can afford to pay their drivers a lot more. No, they're losing money. They actually don't have the money to pay drivers as employees. It would raise the cost of labor dramatically. Yeah. Who cares? Who cares? The unions are demanding it in the name of labor rights, and the politicians, the leftist politicians in California, what do they care about whether a company's making money or losing money? They've made their money. You know where they made their money? They made their money on the capital gains, taxes on capital gains, when Uber went public, and all those Uber employees cashed in and made money. The state of California has a very high capital gains tax, and they make their money when Silicon Valley companies go public. It's time for Silicon Valley to move out of California. It's time not only for Uber and Lyft to shut down operations in California. They should close their offices in California. They should move their headquarters to Austin, Texas, or to Nashville, Tennessee, or to, Reno, Nevada, or somewhere. Reno, Nevada is not a good place. No, they should go to a university town. They need tech guys. Austin, Texas is perfect. And leave the state of California. Yeah, Air Right shouldn't leave California. California's where the battle is. California's where the fight is. Why, the last people you want to leave California is Air Right. Air Right is fighting. So you want them to be where the action is. But, even Air Right might move one day. One day. I'm not going to say more than that. But, yeah, let's see Silicon Valley move. There are other good university places other than the Bay Area. Nowhere may be quite as good as the Bay Area. But let's hope that Uber actually does indeed shrug. All right, let's see. I think I saw some questions here. That's that. That's that. That's that. That's that. I'm looking for questions. Okay, Michael asks. Michael contributes $34 Canadian dollars, $34.99 Canadian dollars, which is about $25 US dollars. Just shows you how low the Canadian dollar has gone since the financial crisis, when they were almost at parity, where the Canadian dollars were almost worth an American dollar. 25 US dollars. He says, I hope Uber shrugs, because if not, it just continues to embolden government to interfere more and more into business. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's got to be a consequence. And again, I think they need it, and there's got to be, they will feel good about it. And there's got to be consequences to the consumers. And there's got to be consequences to the drivers. A lot of the drivers want this. A lot of the drivers are lobbying for this. They want to be employees. Well, screw you. If you're going to lobby for this, you won't be employees and you won't be contractors. You will be out of a job. And that's reality. Teaching people a lesson. That's reality conveying a message. And Uber and Lyft can help reality, can make that happen, right? Can make that happen. Somebody says, your Twitter account tweets during the podcast. Are you using a marketing company to promote the show? And do you think it's worthwhile for others? Do I think it's worthwhile for others? Who's the others? I use a marketing person who is tweeting during the show, tweeting to try to get more people to come and listen live and try to get more people to engage with the show. So, I think it's worth doing. I use Derek. Derek is here while he's not on Twitter. He's here in the chat. And I definitely think if you've got a show, it's worth being out there while it's live, tweeting what you're saying and encouraging people to come to the show. I just think it increases the live participation, which is always good. Oops, why did I? Oh, that was a mistake. See, I'm used to deleting the questions after I answer them, but I can't do that now. I'm going to have to find a different methodology because I'm trying to keep track of the dollars so that we can get an appropriate match. Those of you who came in late, we've got a match on all Super Chat questions today, $2 for one. Brian Rand is going to give us $2 for one on every dollar contributed, up to $250. We're at $25, $50, $254, $56, $81, $91, $92, $97. So we're $97. We've got to get to $250. $250. Then we get $500 from Brian Rand, and we're golden, right? We're golden. $750 a show. You know, I'd be tempted to do a show every day. All right. Let's see. So, Uber, Shrug, please. BLM Backlash. So I talked about this a little bit. When was the last show we did? On Tuesday. In the context of what was going on in Chicago. You know, BLM is basically now not hiding the fact anymore. You know, there were times during the original protests where BLM spokesmen would come out and say, you know, we're really for peaceful protests. We're against the riots. You shouldn't destroy property. You know, what can you do? It'll happen. But really, we're not for that. That's not what we're about. We're for the peaceful protests, and we're not for the destruction of property. Well, that's gone. Now BLM is revealing itself for what it really is, which is a nihilistic, anti-capitalist, anti-private property, anti-American organization. And they are, didn't somebody tell me the volume is too high? I think that's better. You tell me if it's too low now. They are basically now supporting the riots explicitly, defending the rioters, saying that it's just reparations what the rioters are doing, and it's no big deal because it's all insured. I talked about this the other day. And they're coming out and expressing what they're really about. You know, and then you see it a little bit. You see it in the riots in places like Portland and other places. The BLM is not, you know, withdrawing from those riots. BLM is not denouncing those riots like it did again originally. BLM has completely embraced those riots. And I think people are starting to figure out what this is all about. In addition, this whole idea of defunding the police. I mean, that sounds okay, maybe, in the midst of, you know, we just had a police shooting and it was a pretty brutal one, a police killing and it was a pretty brutal one, and we really want to reform the police. But suddenly this idea of what it means is hitting people. You're seeing that in Seattle, where, as I talked about last time, the chief of police actually resigned because of the defunding, because of the reduction in the budget of the police. You're seeing it in places like New York. So in New York, which has a very, very leftist city council, there being proposal to defund the police. And of course, crime rates right now, and we'll talk about crime rates in a minute, crime rates right now are going up in New York. So what you've got right now is city council members, leftist city council members saying, whoa, we don't think you should defund the police. Defunding the police is not a good idea. I mean, our constituency, the people who send us here, rely on the police to keep them safe. No, we're actually against defunding the police. So you're actually seeing people within these communities saying, no, this BLM agenda, well, maybe we'll march with you in the streets and protest, but we are not buying into this defunding the police. And you're slowly, I think, going to see this in more and more and more parts of the country. The insanity of shutting down the police completely, which is what they're doing in Minneapolis, it's not going to happen anyway. People are still, in spite of everything, in spite of the world in which we live, people are still more rational than that. More rational than that. Mike, thank you. That puts us along quite a bit towards reaching our goal of $250 on Super Chat today so that we can get Brian Rand's match of 2-for-1. So $250 and Brian does $500. That gives us $750 for the night. So thank you, Mike, for the support. So slowly people are realizing what BLM really stands for. And it stands for more violence in the streets of America. Because that's what defunding the police actually means, actually represents. It stands for looting. It stands out and out for looting. Remember, on Monday, BLM was outside of City Hall in Chicago demanding that the 100 looters who were arrested the night before be released. They want to make heroes of the looters. This was reparations. This was redistribution. And BLM is for people are starting to realize, I think, even people on the left who don't want to go there, realizing how insane the demands are. I'll give you one other example. You remember in Portland there was this wall of moms. So it was this wall of moms, and I think moms was kind of loose, right? There was this wall of moms that supposedly protected the rioters from the federal officers who were protecting the federal buildings in Portland, and there was a whole thing. There was a lot of violence, and the moms stood in front of them. It was a great photo op, and these women, and what are you going to do? You're going to tear gas these women, or are you going to go after them? So it's got a lot of press, a lot of publicity. Well, it turns out that Black Lives Matter turned against the wall of moms. They turned against the wall of moms. Why did they turn against the wall of moms? Well, what do you think? What do you think? It was at the time, it was presented as the image of motherhood helps the protesters be more relatable, right? And they made a point of saying the moms include those who are non-binary and people who consider themselves mothers. Imagine that. Imagine just considering yourself to be a mother. Considering yourself to be a mother. You don't have to be a mother to be a mother. You just have to consider yourself to be a mother to be a mother. Insanity. The world is insane. But, why do you think BLM turned against the wall of moms? Yeah, Jax has it. Too many white moms. Too many white moms. So they turned against them because too many of the people, I guess, moderating the Twitter group or the Facebook group or whatever were white. Too many of the women who stand in line were white. There weren't enough I mean, if the white women had said they identify as black, maybe that would have counted. I don't know. Maybe. Because I guess you can be not a mom and identify as a mom and be a mom. Maybe you can be white and identify as black and be black. But I guess none of these white women were willing to identify as black, and therefore, so the whole group was basically accused of trying to co-opt the Black Lives Matter movement. And since they were white, that was not allowed, and that actually made the black women feel unsafe because the real Black Lives Matter, I'm not joking here, this is absolutely true. This is an article I read. Now, it's an article on, oh, well, we reached 250 already. I didn't keep track, Brian. There we go. There's Brian. There's the $500. Everybody clap. You know, a little cheer. Yay. We made it a 750, and I'm only 30 minutes into the show. Wow. Somebody else can do what Brian just did and do a match as well, and that way we can continue the match. But, Brian, thank you. I mean, you've been incredibly generous for months now. Thank you for the support of the show on a monthly basis. Thank you for what you do in the Super Chat. Thank you for this match. It worked beautifully because we got a bunch of people who supported without asking a question. Thank you, Luke, for that $100, I think. And then I think Kib with his $20 put us over the limit of the 250 to get the match from Brian. That was terrific. Thank you, guys. So here this group was disbanded, and not only that, but the women on the wall of moms actually apologized for being too white. So they were made to feel guilty. And if you remember the show I did on white fragility, they were fragile, and they didn't realize how racist they really were by being white, I guess. Yeah, by being white. Now, people are reading about this. Now, this is a story I read in Commentary Magazine. It's a reliable source, and they cite a bunch of different, a bunch of different sources. So, yeah. I mean, NPR had a story about this. That, the woman from Black Lives Matter, this is NPR saying, it was frustrated because the moms were getting all the attention in Portland. Quote, the media shows a line of white moms standing together, but these black moms are organizing. And why aren't they getting any credit? So the media was focusing on the white women and not, you couldn't make this up. If this had been, if Ayn Rand had added this to Atlas Shrugged, everybody would have said, oh no, that's not realistic. That's insane. That's crazy, right? That could never happen. You literally cannot make this up. And I think people are starting to figure this out. And I think even people on the left, as I said, the city council in New York, the city council members in New York who are not for defunding the police and are pretty clear about that. They don't want this. I think the mayor of Chicago, right, who is clearly way on the left and has not deployed the police and is just a horrible, horrible mayor. I mean, even she is like, whoa, this is a little too much, this looting, and this Black Lives Matter supporting the looting. And I think you're going to see more and more people on the left saying, okay, that's too far. And indeed, I think they have to do it if they want to win the election in November. If they don't distance themselves from the looters, from the cancelers, from the nuttiness of what is going on in the streets of America, the violence and the horror of what these people are doing. I think Trump wins and potentially Republicans gain in the House and maybe even gain in the Senate. Who knows? Americans don't like this stuff. This is why I've said over and over and over again, I don't think the extreme left can win politically because Americans are not anywhere close to where BLM is. Yeah, they'll march against police brutality. If they think it's police brutality, they will not march for rioters. They will not march to defund the police. They will not march for this silly, nonsensical, I identify as X and therefore I am X, or, white fragility. Up to a point, they're willing to tolerate all that. But they will not go all the way. And the more the left pushes this agenda, the more they are disintegrated, the more nihilistic they are, the more Americans will reject them. And if the more moderate left doesn't distance itself from them, they will get crushed at the polls, ultimately. And I think Trump, if he wants to win, needs to do everything he can to encourage this. By the way, another thing that's playing in Trump's favor right now, although it shouldn't, it should play against him, but it will play for him, is the fact that homicide rates are spiking in the United States, suddenly, out of nowhere. So, for a long, long time, homicide rates have declined dramatically. And, I thought it was a joke, but worse than a joke, a horror, that Trump in 2016 could declare that there was carnage in the streets of America. When in 2016, basically violence had dropped by 54%. Violent crime since 1993. 54%. Thank you, Jennifer. Not only do you identify as a Iran supporter, you're really a Iran supporter. So I don't know if that counts. I'm not sure if that's a strike against you. If you're actually what you identify as, versus identifying as something that you're not actually of. I don't know. I don't know how that works. We'll have to figure that one out. So I don't know if you know this, but from 1993 until 2018, violent crime in the U.S. cities dropped by 54%, less than half. And the pace of decline was actually greater in the cities than in the suburbs and rural communities. Right? In 1990, just to give you a sense of the numbers, in 1990, New York City alone had 2,262 murders. $2,262 murders in 1 year in New York City. Now, today, this year, you won't have 262 murders in the nation's largest 25 cities combined. 25 cities. You won't get that number. So even with the spike in violence in the cities right now, it's way down from 1993 or 1990. But we've all gotten used to the low crime rates. We've gotten so used to them that Trump can say there's carnage in the streets of America, and everybody goes, yeah, when there wasn't. Not as compared to history. But we don't know history. We know nothing about history. And it feels like there's a lot of violence in the streets. And yet, here we are this year, crime is, not violent crime, murders. All other forms of crime are down. Burglaries, rapes, assault, all of those are down, except for murder. That's up. Murder is up. Homicide is up. It's up about 24% so far, which is a lot in the top 50 largest cities. So all 50 of the largest cities have had 3,612 murders, and that's up 24% from last year. That's a lot. Summers, murders go up always. But again, this year, the summer has been particularly deadly in the 50 largest cities in the United States. By the way, a lot of people say, oh, this is those Democratic mayors. It's not just in Democratic cities. It's in Republican cities too. It's in places, in cities like let me just find this, city like Fort Worth, which has almost 35% increase in homicides. That's, you got a Republican there. Houston is up over 25. I'm not sure who the mayor of Houston is. Jacksonville, which is a Republican city. Charlotte. I'm not sure if Charlotte is Democratic or Republican. But there's a number of Republican cities that have an increase in violence. This is not an issue of Democratic cities at all. 2 independents. We've actually got mayors who are independent. San Antonio and San Diego are both cities that have independents. Both of them have seen an increase in murders. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This is about murder rates going up across. I think it's to a large extent a consequence of COVID and a large extent of shutting people at home and shutting down schools and shutting down workplaces and people unemployed and people just being miserable and not seeing any kind of future. Chicago is really bad. Chicago, in terms of percentage increases, Chicago has the second highest in the United States so far this year. It's actually increased by more than 50%. Still nowhere near the rates it was in the 1990s, by the way. Austin, Texas, has seen the homicide rate grow by 64%. 64%. Now, it started from a very low number, where Chicago's number is very large. So you don't hear much about Austin. But still, it's pretty alarming that Austin, Texas would have such high. But again, Fort Worth, other places. The murders are not happening in the center of the city. They're happening in the suburbs. They're happening in the low-income areas, mostly Black and Latino communities, especially being hit hard. It's mostly gang violence. It's mostly drug-related. Fighting over drug turf goes back to the show I did on the war on drugs and the horror of the war on drugs. By the way, if you're in Australia, I see Australia, you can do Super Chat. Although I've had Super Chat from Australia, but maybe you can go to paypal.me/Yaron Brook and do it there. Make a one-time payment there. Or you can go to yaronbrookshow.com/support and make a monthly contribution there, which is the ideal. Let's see. So this increase in violence is definitely going to play in Trump's favor. I mean, a large part of how Trump, thank you, Jeff, a large part of how Trump won last time was creating this sense of, people being scared. People being scared. Fear was a big driver. Carnage in the streets of America was a big driver. And now he can say it again. Now, the question you should all ask is, well, you've been president for 4 years. How come there's still carnage? You promised to end the carnage. But people don't ask questions. People don't think. So, by the way, big cities run by Republicans that have seen double-digit rates increases in crime. We're talking about homicides. Miami, San Diego, Omaha, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Jacksonville. All, thank you, Justin. All cities that are run by Republicans and have still seen double-digit increases in crime rates. So it's not a Democratic versus the independent cities. Were not San Diego. It's San Antonio and Las Vegas. They have mayors who are what? Independents, not Republicans or Democrats. Okay, last topic I have is, let's see if there's anything here about what we've talked about so far. Does the U.S. historical Wild West attitude towards self-protection with guns play any part in defunding the police? No, I don't think so. I mean, the Wild West ultimately, remember, the sheriff came in and cleaned it up. I mean, Wild West was incredibly violent until the sheriff showed up. It's only libertarians, anarchists think the Wild West was somehow a peaceful, beautiful thing because everybody carried a gun. When everybody carries a gun, murder rates go up, not down. Today, if you're not carrying a gun and you get into a bar fight and you get angry and you get mad and maybe you get a little drunk, then maybe you punch the guy in the face and he punches you back and there's a bar fight. But if you're carrying a gun, it's likely that you pull on him and he pulls on you and a bunch of people get killed. So I don't believe that an armed society is a peaceful society, in spite of the fact that what's his name, Robert Heinlein wrote that. I don't think it's actually true. All right, let's see if there's any other super chats. People complain when companies with high profits pay less, given that Uber posts huge losses. Shouldn't they be okay with them paying little? No, because it's not just about profit. It's about the fact that, when Uber went public, a lot of Uber senior management became multimillionaires. The fact that the people in headquarters are being paid a lot. The fact that programmers are probably being paid six figures. All of that is probably the case. So profit is just one element of it. It's not the only one. Part of this definitely has to do with the fact that people are making money off of Uber and Lyft. Yet these supposedly poor drivers are not making a lot of money. Why do you think homicide in the 90s declined? Some say policing, some say high incarceration. The Free Economics book claims it was legal abortions. Lots of theories. Yeah, I mean, I've read all the different theories, and I don't know exactly, right? So suddenly, there was a there's a baby boomlet, small baby boom, that happened where the kids grew up in the 80s and 90s. And then they were growing up in the 90s, and there were very few younger people following them. So that's part of it. That's also related to legal abortions. Legal abortions is more nuanced because the argument he makes about legal abortions is that fewer unwanted kids were born, and therefore fewer unloved kids, or fewer kids to single mothers, and so on. And if you look at the last 30 years, it's indeed the case that teen pregnancies are down. Single mothers are down, among poor people. So a lot of the things that supposedly precipitated the increase in crime in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, those are all down. It's also true that we put a lot of people in jail on a lot of offenses where they probably shouldn't have gone to jail, but yet if you put them in jail, some of them would have become violent criminals, and now they're in jail, so they didn't. So maybe that's part of it. Policing changed. Policing became more community-oriented, more in the neighborhoods, more on the streets, and I think that helped. And then Steven Pinker has a kind of attempt at broader explanation, which I think is probably right. Generally, the trend over the last 200 years has been that we generally are moving towards less and less tolerance of violence. Less and less tolerance of violence. I mean, to the point today where when we were in school, when I was in school, which is a long time ago, granted, I'm getting old, we used to fight all the time. I mean, we used to fight a lot. I mean, not just bullies. I used to fight the bullies always. But we used to fight. We used to get into fights. And it wasn't that horrific, but, we did. I used to, when I was in, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, I used to pull girls' hair, right? I mean, that's how I would get attention. If a girl I liked, I used to be physical. The only way you knew how to be physical was violence. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying we were. That's how we were. And yeah, the teachers would scold us, and the parents would scold us, and that would be it. But there was no today. I mean, it's like, oh my God, if a young kid is violent in any way, people go nuts. They freak out. They freak out. Like bullying is this. Well, the way to deal with a bully is to stand up to him and usually knock him down and just fight back, even if you lose. And then they usually go away. So a lot of being a boy and being physical and doing the kind of physical things that kids do, that's knocked out. And there's there's just an intolerance of all forms of, violence, of all forms of being physical with one another. And part of that has good consequences. Part of that has consequences of people in society out there just being less physical. I mean, if you took away excuse me, if you took away the war on drugs, violence in America would plummet. On top of it, it already plummeted. I mean, it would be unbelievable how safe America would be if the war on drugs would end it tomorrow. So we have a very, very low tolerance of violence, which is good, which is very good. I don't think the way we treat boys is right, but I think that the low tolerance of violence is definitely good. Steven Pink in his book shows these commercials of, there would be commercials in the 1940s and 50s where husbands would be spanking their wives. And that was just acceptable. That kind of, today, that idea, that's abusive, that you would go to jail for that. You can't spank your wife. Unless you're doing it in a playful manner that leads to sex, I guess. But, as a form of even playful, punishment, it's just, whoa. So our attitude towards these things, spanking kids and all of this has changed dramatically, right? And most of it, I'd say 80% to 90% of that is good. And, Steven Pink associates that with the victory of the Enlightenment. That is, there's still elements in our culture, the Enlightenment values, that have to do with it's not about violence. And I think generally civilization moves in that direction. It moves away from violence, against violence. And I think with the economic boom in the 80s and 90s, with, just a rise of city centers is nicer. And I think a rise in the standard of living, in spite of the fact that we can measure that, or it doesn't get picked up necessarily in the economic measures of wealth and income, people's lives are better. I think violence has declined. And again, if you took out the war on drugs, and violence would be way, way, way down. Right. All right. Let's see. All right, we got a lot of live viewers right now. I'd appreciate it if before you left, you liked the show. We should have about 200 likes. We've only got 100, and I'm sure you guys all like the show, so please like the show. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and push the little bell next to the subscribe button. That way you'll be notified when the show goes live, and that'll benefit you. And, of course, you can support the show by asking a Super Chat question on YouTube. And we've already raised a significant amount of money on YouTube today. Thank you, Brian Rand, for the match. And then you can support the show on a more consistent, permanent basis by going to yaronbrookshow.com/support and making a monthly contribution. And that is hugely, hugely appreciated by myself. And let me say, particularly at a time where I can't go out and give speeches, I can't go out and give talks, basically that whole portion of my income is shut down to zero. And that was a much, much bigger portion of my income than doing this. And yet now it's zero. So right now, all of my intellectual activity is funded by what we do here. So, and the talks I'm doing online, I'm doing them all for free because mostly it's for groups that don't pay. So if you want to help subsidize those talks and help subsidize the show, and offer value for value, please support the show at yaronbrookshow.com/support. All right, let's see. Back to school. Should schools reopen? Should schools reopen? What would be your answer to that? Well, my answer to that is, I don't know. That should be up to the school and the parents. Indeed, the reason we have this question is because we have government schools. We have so-called public education, really government education. And therefore, politicians make these decisions. But this shouldn't be a decision politicians make any more than politicians should decide which businesses should open or which not. And I know they do make those decisions, but they shouldn't. I'm anti-lockdowns. Certainly long lockdowns, indefinite lockdowns, and broad lockdowns. I mean, it's one thing to lock down a small area where there's an emergency for a short period of time and then it's over. But any lockdowns, like the lockdowns that we're seeing all over the country and have seen, immoral, a violation of the government's responsibility to protect individual rights. It's a massive violation of rights. And schools should be the same. That is, schools should decide based on what's going on in their neighborhood, based on what the parents want. If schools, some schools would reopen, some schools might close. I suspect most schools would reopen because most parents want the school to reopen. The risk of COVID to children is minimal. It's not zero. Let's be clear. It's not zero. But the flu is actually riskier to children than is COVID. More children die of the flu than die of COVID. We don't shut down the schools because of the flu. Now, the other flip side of that is that once the child has it, they can infect adults, and older adults do die at a much, 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 much higher rate than the flu. So mortality from COVID is quite high when you get to significant ages, above 70. The percentage of people who get infected with COVID or die is ridiculously high. But that's not a school problem. If there are teachers that are older, they should not teach. They should isolate themselves. If parents are older, then the parents need to find a solution to that. Maybe not send their kids to school, or maybe find a way to test more often, to isolate themselves. But generally, the solution to COVID has always been the same. And I've been saying this since February. The solution to COVID is to isolate the vulnerable. Do everything you can to isolate old people and people with debilitating diseases that make them very vulnerable to COVID. It might turn out that that's a significant number of people. Whatever. Isolate them. Cocoon them to the extent possible. You won't be able to do it completely. Some people will die. We have to accept that disease causes death. That's part of reality. That is just a fact. Denying reality won't save anybody. You got to cocoon and protect the vulnerable. And then you got to test. You got to trace. You got to isolate. And generally, you got to leave people alone, particularly young people. You got to leave people alone. Let them live their lives. Mostly young people are the productive people in a society. The economy won't take a hit if you take out 65-year-olds and over. And that should have been the solution from day one. Trump completely blew it in the beginning, and then state governors blew it from there. And in general, the response to COVID by the American government has been pathetic, among the worst in the world. And it doesn't seem like people are learning the right lessons. People are learning. We should have locked down earlier. No, we should have done what you're supposed to do in a pandemic, what the CDC advised to do in a pandemic, what every epidemiologist early on advised needed to be done. Test, trace, isolate, and generally cocoon the elderly and the sick. That's it. Now, would you still have dead people? Yes. Less than we have, a lot less. And even less than Sweden has. Sweden per capita has slightly more than the United States. But Sweden's economy is doing dramatically better than the United States. Dramatically better than the UK. And it didn't lock down. So should schools open? Yeah, they should open. But they shouldn't be government schools, so that schools can make those decisions independently as private schools, and you can decide whether to send your kid or not to send your kid. Sweden, by the way, never shut down the schools. Up till, I can't remember what grade, I think 7th or 8th grade. All schools stayed open. Because kids don't get sick, typically, from COVID. Mortality is less than the flu. So why did we ever close the schools? Why did we ever do lockdowns? Why are we still doing lockdowns? Our whole responses has been insane. I mean, and I've said, just the response to COVID should be justification not to vote for Trump. A failure on this scale by the federal government should justify not voting for whoever's president, no matter who the alternative is. I've said this many times. People have to suffer the consequences of their failures politically. If you let them get away with their failures on an ongoing basis. Okay. By the way, there's been a bunch of articles about the complete failure of COVID in the UK and in the United States. There's cover story in Time magazine, of the Atlantic magazine, Wall Street Journal, lengthy article. So they're finally documenting in great detail the failure of this administration and the governors to actually deal with COVID appropriately. And they recognize that the scientists always had the plan. The CDC had a plan on how to deal with the pandemic. Just the execution was so pathetic by the government, both here and in Europe. All right, let's do Super Chat questions. Let's start with a $20 or more one. We've got one $20 or more. Why do you think homicide... Oh, we did this already. All right, I don't know. Let's just see something. All right, the rest are not $20 ones, so we'll do them in order. All right, Palestinians are recalling their ambassador from the United Arab Emirates after the United Arab Emirates established full diplomatic ties with Israel. Is this the first of many more deals between Israel and other Arab states? Any thoughts? I mean, there's already been a lot of deals between Israel and Arab states. I mean, Israel has peace with Egypt. It has peace with Morocco. It has peace with Jordan. I mean, literally peace treaties with these countries. It has had kind of loose diplomatic relations with UAE for a long time. Not formal ones, but Israelis traveled through Dubai and went to Dubai and did stuff in Dubai, and politically it was fine. So Dubai and UAE, the Emirates generally have been quite friendly towards Israelis and Israeli money and Israeli technology for a long time. And in more recent times, the hostility towards Iran, which is Shiite and these are Sunnis, has driven more and more of these kind of people towards Israel. Even the Saudis are making friendly noises towards Israel over the last 5 to 10 years out of fear of the Iranians. So are we going to see more deals? I don't know with whom. Maybe the Saudis. The Saudis would be the big one, but I don't think the Saudis are quite ready. Wahhabis are still too powerful in Saudi Arabia. So you've got now Egypt, and Qatar was not going to do it because Qatar is supporters of Hamas and Hezbollah. You're not going to get Yemen. You're not going to get who you're going to get. You're not going to get Syria. You're not going to get Iraq. So, yeah, these are the kind of the Tunisia I think already has, and if they don't, Tunisia might have diplomatic relations. But you're not going to get the big prize is Saudi Arabia, and I think it's too early for the Saudis. But let's put it this way. The deal with UAE could not have happened without the Saudi Arabia giving it a thumbs up. And it's motivated by one, antagonism towards Iran and wanting a joint venture with Iran. I wouldn't be surprised if the UAE wants the missile defense system that Israel has to protect themselves from Iranian missiles. So that could be part of it. The other thing is Israel has this amazing desalination technology. Israel is now not dependent on water from rain. Israel now gets all its water from desalination. And the UAE, and as all the Arab states in that desert environment, I'm sure would love to get the technology, the desalination technology that is available. Right. All right. Let's see. What is my favorite? Hating Trump or ignoring Bitcoin? I don't ignore Bitcoin. I do hate Trump. That's not a secret. But I have rational, legitimate, existential reasons to do so. And I've never attacked Trump without giving reasons and justifications. And when it comes to COVID and Trump, I've actually done shows where I've literally gone step by step by step by step and articulated all the failures. All the failures. And you guys can claim that it's just irrational and emotional, but that flies in the face of facts. All right, Jax has a $20 question. Glenn Lowry recently had a San Mateo High School teacher on his Blogs Head show with some good insight about reopening schools. Might be worth a listen there. I matched my own norm, $10 chat, so she gave 20. Cool. Thanks, Jax. I'll look it up. Glenn Lowry has generally good podcasts. All right. Let's see. How would you compare the position of the presidential candidates based on the standard of individual rights? I'd give them all an F. All of them an F. They don't know what rights are. They couldn't spell it if their life depended on it. So there is no individual freedom. They don't believe in individual freedom. I don't know how you do these rankings, right? So Trump would get an F on immigration. He'd get an F on abortion. Biden would get an F on economic freedom. Trump would also get a D- in economic freedom based on government spending. The deficit is the biggest it's ever been. You could go issue by issue, and you'd have to divvy it up between the two. And I think you'd find that the left and right are really, really bad. I don't know what you'd gain from that knowledge of, left is worse, the right is worse, the left is right. You'd add them up. That's not how you do this. Again, I think the only way to vote in elections is strategically and to think long-term about the consequence of your vote. The only way, in my view, and I'll say it again, I've said it many times, the only way to save this country is to provide an actual opposition party to the leftist economic policies of the left. And the Republicans are not an opposition party in terms of those things. They're not an opposition party really in anything, because on the social issues, they're pathetic. And on the economic issues, they agree with the left. So the only way to save this country is to have an opposition party. And the only way to have an opposition party is to completely revamp the Republican Party and put it on different grounding and different foundation. And to do that, Trump needs to be defeated, because if you don't defeat Trump, then you don't get a new political party. What you get is the same old Republican Party, but worse, you get Trump's political party. So just adding up positions doesn't add too much, and I don't think you get a lot of real nuance in there, right? On some of the biggest issues, Democrats are better than Republicans. Let's see. If schools don't reopen, should school teachers who are now having to use parts of their home to teach start charging the school district for rent and utilities? Yes. Well, I don't know why they're doing it at home. Why don't they just open up private schools and charge the kids. And I think some parents would be happy not to have to homeschool their kids. So just start lots of private schools. That's what I would do. If you're a teacher and you're not being allowed to go back to your school, start a private school. A small one, just 5 kids, 6 kids, 7 kids. You'll probably make more money than you get from the government schools. And you'll have a lot more fun. How could Trump say we're in a V-shaped recovery? Well, because it's Trump. He can say anything. Its correlation to reality could be zero. He's Trump. He can shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and you'll still elect him. You'll still vote for him. So why is he bothered about lying? Right? Now, the economy is recovering. The economy is recovering, and it won't be a V-shaped recovery in a sense of a sharp back increase. It will slowly improve over time. But a lot of that is going to be at the cost of major economic pain in the future. That is, we might recover faster here, but the cost is going to be, because at some point we're going to have to pay back all this debt and all this stuff that Trump and Pelosi, the $3.7 trillion that they threw into the economy supposedly to keep it alive. You've got to keep this going. Now, Alfred says Biden doesn't lie. Of course Biden lies. But Trump has taken lying to a new level. He lies about stupid things, about little things, about everything in a way that no president has before. And he doesn't care if you catch him at the lie. Other presidents have lied, but they try to cover it up. The difference is that Trump doesn't care. Lying, he's a more committed pragmatist than anybody I know. His view is if a lie works, then fine. What's the problem? It worked. Why should I care? Biden lies like every politician lies, like all conventional politicians lies. They're normal. Trump, literally, everything he says is a lie, but he doesn't care about it in a way that's truly unique. Truly unique. Yeah, I mean, Trump intends to deceive. He intends to deceive some of the people like you, or maybe not like you specifically, but people who will accept everything he says, and when the media points out that it's a lie, they'll say, but it's the media, we don't trust it, it's fake news. Everything he says is true, including when he said, I mean, this was so obvious early on, when he said, and no president, no other politician would do this. He said he had more people at his inaugural address than any other president, which is a blatant lie, and the satellite photos show it's a blatant lie. He puts the satellite photos on so everybody can see, and he continues to say it. And the stunning thing is that people didn't care. So people didn't care that he lied about something stupid like that, and then he just continues to say it. So I've never seen anything like it. Never seen anything like the kind of lying that Trump engages in. And the volume, and the persistency, and the consistency, and the fact that in spite of that, nobody criticizes him. I mean, the mainstream media does, but nobody on the right criticizes him. And the people here in the chat who defend him. It's just stunning to me. Just stunning. You know, he signs bills for $3.7 trillion of stimulus. And if Obama had done that, all of the Trump supporters who are on my show right now would be horrified and calling him a fascist and running into the streets and demonstrating and starting movements to attack him. But Trump signed the $3.7 trillion, so it must be good. We cannot criticize Trump. Right? I mean, I'm not saying the mainstream media criticize Trump, but the Trump supporters never criticize Trump. Trump supporters never criticize Trump. It's shocking. You could say Trump is a lying, he's an idiot, he failed with COVID, he did this leftist stimulus package, but you know what? He's better than Biden. I'm voting for him. And I'd have some respect for you. But you don't. You don't say any of that. You maybe say, I don't really like Trump. No, but criticize Trump. Make a list of all the things that Trump did wrong, which would be impossible because it's daily. It's insane how many there would be. But no, I don't want you to say Trump is the list of all evil. I get that. I want you to literally criticize Trump. I want you to list all the things that Trump has done wrong. Because you criticize me for pointing those things out. So I assume you don't agree with me about when I point out that Trump failed with COVID. I assume you think he was successful with COVID. When I say Trump failed with the stimulus, I assume you disagree with me because you defend Trump. So I want you to list all the things you think Trump did wrong. Not that he's the less of two evils. That, I know that's your fallback. But I want cognition, not slogans. And cognition would be, here are all the things Trump did wrong. Here are all the things I violently disagree with Trump. Here are all the things that I think Trump did that are violations of individual rights and clearly evil and clearly bad for this country and clearly are horrible, just like the left. And yet, he's the less of two evils, so I'm going to vote for him. Then I'd have some respect for you. But I never, ever see that from people like you. I'm talking to the people on the chat who are defending Trump. I don't see it. And I don't see it from any of you listening. And I don't see it on the right-wing media, right? And I don't see it from Republican senators. People who would be outraged by the stimulus package if it was a Democrat. Don't care now. Don't care. They don't say a word. I don't hear a word from you guys. Good. There we go. Alfred, was that hard? So when I say it, what you say is, Yaron's got Trump derangement syndrome. But I said exactly what you just said. He failed with COVID. He failed with stimulus package. He doesn't understand separation of church and state. That's great. He shouldn't have gone and hugged the brutal dictator of North Korea. And we could go on and on and on. And that's great. That's all I do. And yet, because I say it, I'm not trying too hard. He's in my face. I read the news. I don't know what you guys do. He's in my face. I can't ignore it. And my job is to be a cultural commentator, a political commentator. He constantly does bad stuff. So I constantly point it out. And you constantly defend him. That's mind-boggling. Because you wouldn't defend a Democratic president who did exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. You wouldn't defend him. All right. Well, no, I'm not wrong. Yes, you caught up ultimately. But it's only when I had to call you out about it. Right? You've got to be objective. I know it's hard to be objective, but you've got to try. The most annoying Trump brag, this is a super chat question, not me. Most annoying Trump brag and support is his created the greatest economy in history, completely false to the point of ridiculous. Yes, I know, but his supporters support that brag. They think it's true, which is stunningly ignorant if you know anything about the history of U.S. economy. All right. I'm currently rereading Atlas Shrugged after about 10 years. How many times have you read it? Do you try to read it every 5 years or anything like that? Or do you pick it up occasionally? I pick it up occasionally and flip through it. I pick it up occasionally and read it. I don't know how many times I've read it. Probably not as many as some people have. Maybe, 4 or 5 times. Right? I love it. But it's... I wish I read generally more. Right? Yeah, I like Ben Sass. I like the fact that Ben Sass criticizes Trump. I don't think he does enough of it, but I think when he does it, he's very good, and he's right on point. I actually like Ben Sass. He's too religious, but other than his religiosity, I met him once. I've seen him. I met him. I shook his hand. And I'm impressed by Ben. He's smart. He's knowledgeable. He knows American history. He talks about individual rights. He talks about the founders in an intelligent way. He's exactly the kind of person that I think Trump winning throws out of the Republican Party. I think Ben Sass is exactly the kind of people that we need in the Republican Party. Again, I wish he was less religious, but he's from Kansas, so I guess he can't get elected if he's less religious. But he's smart, and he's knowledgeable. And he's actually looks presidential. I mean, I could see him winning a presidential race. And I met him in Colorado 4 years ago, something like that, when he first entered the Senate. And I was impressed. And good for him for going after Trump once in a while. But this is my fear about what Trump does to the Republican Party. He makes it difficult for people like that to exist. Like, we already know that he and Ben Sasse keep going at each other. Trump lashes out at Ben Sasse. If Trump wins, I think, where do people like Ben Sasse go? Or Lee from Utah, or well, not as many as there used to be. We know where Justin Amash doesn't belong in the party anymore. He's gone, which is sad. Sad. Right? We need a Justin Amash in Congress, in the Republican Party, trying to shape and mold the Republican Party. But that is impossible in the era of Trump. And that's the real danger he does, much more than all the mistakes that he's made, is that he has made a Republican Party that is in his image. And that Republican Party is unfriendly to individual rights, unfriendly to capitalism, unfriendly to free trade, unfriendly to all these things. All right. How can they even pretend this is done with good intentions? I'm not even sure what that is for anymore. Sorry, Bree. Andrew, Travis, he would have, I think Travis would have left California. Maybe they still will leave California. That's the founder of Uber. Are there any other racist collectivists who are black like Jesse Leah Pearson? What motivates their form of racism? Is it self-loathing? Why would Larry Elder feature him on his documentary Uncle Tom? I don't know. I don't understand the phenomena because I think Larry Elder, unfortunately, is bought into the tribe. And if you're black and a conservative, you're a good guy. Even if you're an idiot and a racist and in this case, Jesse Lee Pearson is a white supremacist, black. As long as you're conservative, you're okay. And remember, Larry Elder, if I remember right, is anti-immigration. So he loves the fact that Jesse Lee Pearson is anti-immigration. I mean, tribes are very tolerant. Larry Elder used to be a lot more free market than he is now. He's gone way more to the side of Trump, unfortunately. So Jesse Lee Pearson fits into that mold. If the Japanese can learn from the folly of imperialism from nukes, can Marxists learn the folly of Marxism if the failure affects them personally? Yes. It's why you have less Marxists in Russia today. It's why you have less Marxists in Eastern Europe today. Right? Because it hit them, right? If you suffered through the starvation in Ukraine, you're less likely to be a Marxist. So the places that suffered through communism are less likely to be communist. Can you provide a reason on the benefits of having kids in today's society? You have half a chance that the government or media own your kids. I don't know what that means, that the government but yeah, I think having kids in today's society is a very difficult decision. It's a very difficult choice. You bring them into a culture that I think is depraved. And you can't avoid having them being impacted by the culture. You bring them into a world in decline. How does it's very hard to think about the world declining and your kids being part of it. I mean, I think it's a tough choice. I'm not for it or against it. I think you have to really think hard about the benefit you get from having kids and what chance you think you have against the culture and against the schools and against the world out there in help to make them good adults. I can tell you, it's not easy. It's not easy, and it's getting harder. I think it's getting harder. Yaron, do you have any advice for those who are struggling with militant mental illness? Did Ayn Rand write about this topic? No, not much. I mean, Leonard has some stuff on mental illness. I can't remember the name of the lectures, but some of his lectures he covers this. And A lot of mental illness is a consequence of bad ideas and inconsistent ideas and the damage that does, particularly when you're young, to your mind. And a lot of it is fixing your psychoepistemology. Not all of it, but a lot of it is. I mean, the best advice I would have if you're struggling with mental illness is to find a great therapist. I mean, I've interviewed Gina Gorlin on my show. She's helped some people from that interview. A bunch of people have contacted her, and I think she's helped them. I would definitely try to contact Gina Gorlin. That is, find a great therapist who can really help you, and particularly somebody who knows Ayn Rand and is about, in a sense, fixing, knowing the difference between fixing your thinking errors while still dealing with the mental illness, and if necessary, using drugs, but only using them as a reinforcement to kind of a more cognitive approach. So I would definitely try to find Gina Gorlin. Gina Gorlin, you can find her online, and you can contact her and see if she's taking new patients. Any value of living in a mega city in America and being single or making a family. Cities, state, education, and media kill your brain. Suburbs of country. I mean, I live in the city. I mean, I live in San Juan, so it's a city in Puerto Rico. It's not exactly New York. But I love living in cities. I've lived in suburbs. I love both. I think if you're raising a family, then you want to live in a suburban kind of area because it's easier and I think it's less stressful and easier. I think if you're single or if you are a couple and no kids, then I think living in a city or close to a city is hugely valuable because there's culture, there are concerts, there's museums, there's great restaurants, there's things to do. So I love cities. I love the suburbs. But I love the availability of cities. But I can't give you explicit advice on things like that. You have to, part of what your responsibility to yourself is in life is to figure out what your values are and then figure out how and where to live your life in a way that allows you to achieve your values, right? So you have to create a hierarchy of values. What are the most important things for you? And then structure your life so you can gain those values. And that might mean living in the suburbs, might mean living in a farm, it might mean living in the city. It has to be your values that drive that. And you have to think about what are the benefits of each place and how do those play into what your specific values happen to be. OMG asks, I think cognitive behavior therapy is good. Avoid the ones who just prescribe drugs but don't do real therapy. I agree with all that. And I think cognitive behavior therapy is the way to go, and that's kind of what Gina Gorlin does, and she adds to the fact that she's an objectivist. Opinion on the economic model of Dubai. Not a good model. It's a model built on the fact that they have oil or they have ports or they have refining capacity, but it's not built on long-term. It's not built on freedom. It's not built on entrepreneurship. It's a top-down. It's undiversified and it's really bad. And unfortunately, countries are learning from it. That centralized planning is good, but it's not. It's any centralized planned system, like Dubai's, like China's, is a bad system, and ultimately will lead to bad results. Dubai has what it's got going for it is oil, but what happens when the oil runs out? One of the reasons they're trying to team up with Israel is to try to buy technology, or to buy expertise, so that they can survive when oil goes bust. Fairfax County School Administrator in Virginia is discouraging parents from educating their kids or paying tutors while school is closed because it will create an education gap and isn't fair. Thoughts? That is about the most evil thing that you can imagine. It's just down evil. It's basically saying that in the name of equality, we must hold kids down. We must hold people down. We must lower everybody to the lowest common denominator. That's what egalitarianism is, and that is the essence of evil, is to treat people like that. So that's, I could say a lot more about that, but I think, but we're kind of an hour and a half into this. So, but evil. Anything that smacks of egalitarianism, anything where you're advising parents to treat their kids based on how the poorest or the least responsible or whatever treat their kids, is just evil. What do you think is motivating the rise of front porch conservatism? Fear. Fear. I mean, there's always been front porch conservatism. It's always been around. I think it's bigger now because of fear of change, fear of the left, fear of the culture changing, fear of the rejection of religion, but fear of change. What did Ayn Rand call it? They want stagnation. They love stagnation because they're afraid. And that's what conservatives are generally. They want to conserve. They're afraid of progress. I'm a progressive, a liberal, because I want progress. And I believe in liberty. Can you please retell the story of when you attended an open school in Massachusetts and you said that you learned nothing? I'm not sure why you want me to retell the story, but sure. I mean, when I was in 8th grade, I attended probably one of the highest ranked schools in the country in Brookline, Massachusetts. Dukakis' kids attended the school, and the school had no walls. The school, you sat on beanbags. Teachers taught whatever they felt like teaching. So my brother, the teacher didn't feel like teaching math one year. So literally, they had a whole year without math. Instead, they studied Russian, right? And then I don't remember learning much. Math was all you filled out sheets. You just did it at your own pace. I happened to go to a very fast pace because I was motivated. I liked math. So I very quickly became the best student in the class, not because I was smart or anything. I just worked. Other kids didn't because they were, and these are Brookline, Massachusetts. These are kids of professors at MIT and Harvard and stuff like that. And they were lazy and they didn't care and they were unmotivated. And my impression of America was very negative out of my experience in Brookline, Massachusetts, because of the school and the kids and everything. And it was all, this was one of the top rated schools because it was all open, no walls. It was like a massive Dewey experiment in progressive education. And I fell behind that year my Israeli counterparts by at least a year in science and in math, because there was no real science and math. The next year, I literally had to take 11th to 12th grade. I went to high school, and I had to take 11th to 12th grade math and science classes to catch up with my Israeli counterparts. But America's been in decline in science and math. The reason we have sustained the standard of living that we have today is because of immigrants. Most people don't want to admit this, but a significant percentage of the scientists, a significant percentage of the technologists, a significant percentage of the entrepreneurs that have moved this country forward in the last 40 years have been immigrants or children of immigrants. Americans have slacked off, partially because of the educational system, partially because there's no motivation and nobody's provided them with motivation. There's no value system. Some objectivist intellectuals believe there is an Aristotelian renaissance in academia. Is that a good sign? Yeah, I mean, if it's true, it's a fantastic sign. It means a renaissance of reason, fact, science, reality, egoism. So yeah, I hope they're right. I hope they're right. And if it is true, then that's great. The essay I was talking about that Ayn Rand wrote is called The Divine Right of Stagnation. And that's conservatives for you. All right, last question. Jax has the last question. For information, at my daughter's school in San Jose, USD, most of the teachers are going to school to videocast their classes instead of from home. Good. I mean, good for them for at least videocasting classes, and they're going to school to do it because it's easier to do than home. At home, they probably have kids and they have a spouse, and the technology might not be as good or whatever, and they go into school to do it. Let's just hoping that they just open the schools, because kids are not a problem. And if the teacher's not 60 years old or older and not obese or not suffering from diabetes, there's very little they have to worry about. Yaron, how does the U.S. actually pay back all the debts we have? Well, we don't. We basically create inflation, to inflate it away. I mean, we do pay it back, but we do it through inflation. We do it through the Federal Reserve artificially keeping interest rates at zero so the debt doesn't accrue anything. And we inflate it and we tax it. Now, Republicans would say we grow the economy so we can pay it, but all they mean is we grow the economy and then we tax you the profits. But the only way to do it is through inflation or through never paying it. Perpetual kind of thing. And an economic collapse that basically drives the value of that debt to zero and a default. Although I don't think the U.S. government will have a default. I think they'll always prefer inflation to actual default. And they can do it because they've got a printing press. But yeah, we're in deep trouble because however they try to pay it back will hurt economic growth on an ongoing basis. And that's why I've said the decades to come, you young people are going to suffer the consequence because the decades to come are going to have the United States growing at close to zero economic growth. That's what the debt will do. All right, guys, thank you. I'll do something on economics and debt and growth on a show. I'll cover that in greater detail because I know that was too short of an answer. Thanks, everybody. Another great Super Chat session. So those of you who'd like to support me on a regular basis, on a predictable basis, you can do it on Patreon, Subscribestar, YaronBrookShow.com/support on Locals. You can also, of course, use Super Chat to support me, and today was a super chat. Thank you, Brian Rand, who matched all the contributions up to $250. So he put in $500. That was terrific. And he told me he can't do it every show. So we can't expect that every show, but it really is terrific, even if it's only once in a while. Thanks, everybody who contributed. Thanks, everybody who made it possible to get us to $750. And I think we made at least $100 above and beyond that. And then those of you who are leaving now, please like the show on your way out, subscribe, click on the bell to get notifications, and of course, don't forget to share, particularly the short shows that I put up. Don't forget to help me get this into the algorithm by liking and sharing, and that just increases. Tomorrow, we have Kira Peikoff, the journalist, the novelist. We're going to be talking about journalism in general, science journalism in particular. We'll talk more about COVID. We'll talk about the question of why is so much science today not recreatable? Like a lot of journal articles today are written, and then people try to recreate the experiments and they can't. We'll talk about that. She is the editor of a science magazine, an online science magazine. And we'll talk about that and her journey to being a science editor and her journey through journalism. I think it's going to be it'll be really interesting. And I don't really know what she's going to say. So Kira Peikoff tomorrow. And if you haven't read one of her novels, you should. They're good, and we'll pitch her novels tomorrow on the show as well. All right. Talk to you all tomorrow, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock right here tomorrow.